Welcome everyone to the Score Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm your host, Justin Boone, the lead fantasy analyst at The Score, and today's episode is presented by Subway, who now delivers so you can get back to the game. We are on to week 3 here. We have 2 weeks of data now, so that means we can start to notice some trends in usage. It's still early. Normally I wait until 3 games in before I really start to feel confident about what I'm seeing, but 2 weeks is a big enough sample size that we know now we're not completely overreacting to one big game, which, let's face it, a lot of people do that after the opener. It happens every single year. So since we're trying to drill down here on the usage, the snap counts, the targets, all that important stuff, we have a great guest today who is kind of making that his brand. It's Dwayne McFarland of Football Guys, of the Matt Waldman RSP. You might also recognize his name from the Utilization Report, which is a big hit on Twitter. You can check him out on Twitter at Dwayne McFarland. Dwayne, I already told you this when we talked before, but I'm loving the content. I've been checking out all the notes that you've been dropping with the Utilization Report. It's just great stuff. And I'm glad that you're here today to share some of that knowledge with us.
Thank you, man. I'm so glad to be on. Anytime I can, come on with someone and just get to talk football, I love it. And if I get to add data into that, that's my next thing I love. So it's like bringing those two, it's like chocolate and peanut butter for me.
All right, good stuff. Well, let's start with the Chiefs receiving core. And Tyreek Hill went down in week 1. We saw Sammy Watkins go off in that game. Then Demarcus Robinson and Mecole Hardman did the damage in week 2. And we're talking about week-winning performances here, right? Watkins had 9 for 198 and 3 touchdowns. Robinson had 6 for 172 and 2 touchdowns last week. And Mecole Hardman, people might not realize, but he had 4 for 61 and a touchdown. He also had a 70-plus yard touchdown called back due to a penalty. So there's a ton of fantasy value in that offense, we know. And maybe the answer to the question is just grab anyone who's attached or anywhere near Patrick Mahomes. I joked about that on Monday's episode, but how do you view that trio of wide receivers shaking out moving forward, starting with their game against the Ravens this week?
Right. I think, to your last part of that point, that's the biggest thing. Pat Mahomes is plus Andy Reid, right? That's what's the tide that rises all ships. So you want to own any piece of this offense that you can. As far as the way I see this breaking down, over the next few to several weeks with Tyreek Hill still out. I do think Demarcus Robinson is actually the player that's going to give us more consistency. And that's just because of, not just the utilization, but when you watch Demarcus Robinson play, he has a wider range of capabilities right now than Mecole Hardman. Now, Hardman can still be, a very viable asset. It's just that he doesn't do well with press coverage. He doesn't understand a lot of the route running nuances of the NFL. He's still not fully immersed into Andy Reid's scheme and some of the concepts that are going on there. And that's really showing up, on the film. Now, having said that, the couple things he does really well when still paired with Mahomes and Andy Reid, does make him viable. So, for example, Hardman's really good, in these screen type plays or quick plays close to the line where they create space and let him run after the catch. And then the other thing, which you already alluded to, is the guy's super fast, so he can get deep. And we know Mahomes is the guy in the league that you just can't outrun his throw. He's, no matter where you are, whenever you're breaking free, he can find you and get that ball to you. So the good news there is on a lot of teams, a guy like Mecole Hardman with that kind of limited application on the field, it would just be something that you would just have to avoid. But in the Chiefs, it could literally give you a week, like you said, that could win, your week. And Hardman will have one of those likely coming. It's going to probably come. If you look at who they get to play this week, we're going to be playing the Ravens. It's going to be a shootout. So the way I see it ultimately working out, and last week we saw this, Demarcus Robinson, 91% of the snaps, he ran routes on 91% of Patrick Mahomes' dropbacks. Mecole Hardman was at 73% of the snaps and then 80%. Now, what's interesting around Demarcus Robinson that I don't know quite how to, to your point earlier, we only have 2 data points. I don't know quite how to reconcile this. Demarcus Robinson, what I've always viewed him as and the way I've seen the Chiefs view him is more of a possession receiver. This last week, though, the Raiders came out in press coverage and Mahomes basically just said, okay, well, if they're going to do this, then we're going to push the ball vertically down the field. His average depth of target, Justin, was 25.3 yards.
It's just wild.
It's crazy, right? Demarcus Robinson's the guy I expect to work, the intermediate area of the field, 10, 12, 13 yards down the field. So I don't think we're going to obviously, and most listeners, they already know this. We're not going to continue to see, huge weeks like that every week from Robinson, but I think his ability to beat press coverage, his ability to, do a wider variety of things is going to keep him on the field more, probably make him the more consistent option. But Mecole Hardman is still going to hold value, as a guy that can absolutely break a big play and win your day.
So would you say that once Tyreek Hill comes back, and we don't know what the situation is there, he could be out even longer than expected, but once he's back, you feel like Robinson is the fantasy play at that point?
Yeah, I do think Robinson will be the fantasy play. Interestingly, in week 1, he only saw 63% of the snaps while Hardman saw 78%. So that was interesting. That's one I to your point earlier, I'd like to have that third or fourth data point, just to see where we're at. But yeah, I do believe that Robinson will be the guy that'll be on the field more. But I see Hardman as being a guy that they'll still love to get out there and say, okay, we have Tyreek Hill and Mecole Hardman out here on the field at the same time, both being legitimate deep threats. And they're going to want to see how does the defense defend it. And then based on that, I think they'll adjust their game plan for that game.
And by the time Tyreek comes back, Hardman, he's going to go through that rookie learning curve. He could be much improved by the time Hill gets back in this offense too. So it really is tough to project when you're talking about, whatever it's going to be, 6 weeks, 8 weeks until we see Hill again.
Yeah, absolutely. And we still don't know for sure if that's a very firm timeline, on Hill. It's kind of something we're not hearing a ton around, this week. But would it surprise us, if all of a sudden, he missed an additional couple of weeks? Who knows? But to your point earlier, you just got to own any piece to this offense you can. If for some reason Mecole Hardman were to go down, the name that people just, I'll throw in that people need to remember is Byron Pringle. They released him, then they brought him back. DeAnthony Thomas is really just the gadget guy. Pringle is actually a player that's got a wider skill set that could do something. If you're in a super, super deep league and you're trying to be preemptive, Byron Pringle's just a name just to keep on your radar.
Said leave on time, my baby said leave on time.